I'll walk over here. Yes, so as mentioned, the title of this presentation is Leaving Breadcrumbs, an Agile Journey Towards Requirement Storytelling. And it's really the story about how we did some major changes to our work with quality assurance and how that left us no longer wondering about requirements or expectations, but instead we started letting our customer tell their story or our story so that we could have common expectations. So the storyteller, that's me. My name is Mia. I work with test and QA since 2001. I have a background both as a tester but also in test management and test strategy as well. So this last few years I've been a QA specialist at Data Ductus. I'm located at, well, Data Ductus, if you don't know, it's a large global consultancy firm. We do a lot of projects within NSO of different kinds, mostly complex ones. And we have an office, we have several offices in Sweden. One of them is in Skellefteå. That's located about 900 kilometers north of here. And that's where I'm located as well. So Skellefteå is also the home of what's called the Nordic Storytelling Center. And that's a center dedicated to maintaining the storytelling traditions, you could say. And in my spare time, I'm a storyteller there, telling stories about different things in different venues and with different audiences. So that, together with my testing background, has been a large component in my work with quality assurance as well, which I'll get into here more. Some basics you need to know about a little bit when listening to this presentation. You need to know Agile. We work in Agile, Scrum mostly, but adapted Scrum, I would say. You need to know retrospectives, what those are, even if I will do some short explanations. QA, when I say QA, I mean quality assurance. Then when I talk about development and testing, we have test-driven development and behavior-driven development. So those are some terms I will be mentioning. And if you don't know them or have any questions about those, just find me after the session and I'll try to explain. So this is the basic layout of a story. So you can use this layout to tell your customer story, to explain requirements and use cases. But you can also use it to tell any story you want. And I'll use that today. So every story has a beginning where you establish the players of the story. You establish the period and place, where are we, when are we? And you want to build expectation, what's going to happen in this story. So that's the beginning. And then you have the chapters of the story where you let the story play out. What's happening? Maybe some drama, maybe some love or hate or whatever. You have the chapters where you let those things play out. And then finally you reach the end of the story, where you find out where did the people of the story end up, what actually happened, and was it good or was it bad, or maybe both, or maybe neither. And then often when you reach the end of a story, you can kind of understand the moral to that story as well. What is the moral of the story? Is there a moral to the story? And you can also reflect on whether or not that story is useful to you. So that's how we can think about use cases as well. But for now, I'll use this format for my story. So the beginning, who were the players, and when was this and what happened? The beginning of our story, we've been working with the NSO projects for quite some time. But the beginning of this story is not with the first NSO project. In fact, it's when we got a great big complex network projects on our hands that we needed to implement. And we realized that we needed to make some changes to how we did our development and implementation, but also with our work with quality. We needed to rethink things. And that's where I came in. So the first thing that I did when I came in as the quality assurance specialist is that I established 3 main goals for our quality. And that was to have quality of code, to have quality of work, and to have knowledge and awareness. And well, some ways of doing this is to have common ways of working, for example, to have to know that knowledge equals awareness. So it's very important that everyone has information. And you have that through communication, which is also very important when having a quality way of thinking. And of course, test and verification. And the point of setting up these goals and coining the expression a quality way of thinking was to really stress the fact that quality is not only within the coding. Quality has to be all the way through the organization, and it has to be present in every step of the way. So it's not just testing and verification. So that's why using the phrase a quality way of thinking. And this was presented to the team in this project. So the team at that time really perceived this as sort of a balance of expectation as well as freedom to do things and a responsibility. That's how they perceived what I was saying about quality way of thinking, and they were actually quite right about that as well. And this really turned out to be the theme to our story as well, because the team was involved in everything that happened, and these three things really were really important in that work that we did and the journey that we had. So that is the beginning of all this that we were doing. So moving into the actual story, what actually happened, this was the beginning and where we were. Well, as you know, we had this big, complex network project on our hands that we were implementing. But there were some issues or maybe challenges. We didn't really have any requirements, no clear requirements at least. We didn't really have any acceptance criteria either. We didn't really have a process to work with this as well, because we were working agile, but to work agile in this type of project, that's a challenge, because it's such a moving project and it's a very big one, as I said. So no real process, no requirements, and no testing environments, and no testers either. So that's quite a challenge to begin with in such a large project. So what we decided to do to really grab hold of all this in a good way was that we decided to throw everything we knew out the window. No longer using the same process we had, no longer using the way we had ways we had of working, just start over again. So that was really the beginning of our agile journey. We had challenges, as I said. So finding a way through this jungle of agile and distributed teams and moving requirement bases, we had to find a way through all that to achieve great quality at a manageable cost as well. And we did that by deciding that we would try out different paths. Try things out, continue on paths that worked for us, doing things that are good, and leaving paths that were less good for us, that didn't work for us. So backing down from those, and that's why I'm talking about leaving breadcrumbs, because if something doesn't work, you take a step back and you try another path. So that's what we decided when we threw everything out the window. We would try things out, and we needed to leave some headroom to do that as well, both time-wise and investment-wise, of course, within reason, but that's what we needed to do. So we did. So this journey, I will explain our journey through a number of projects that we did to reach where we are today. So the first project, you already know the setup for it. Lots of challenges, lots of things that didn't work, but we also had a lot of things that did work. We did have agile. We did use Jira as a tool to work with our project and our development, and also our quality assurance. we did have really skilled programmers with lots of experience within NSO. So those things we did have. We also had quite a strict definition of done for all our stories. So quality was there, just not in all the steps of the way. But we did go through this project. We were using test-driven development to achieve quality of code as best as we could. We had some challenges with the testing because it took a really long time. So turnaround time for new code was quite long, as you may have heard in Christopher and Jesper's presentation earlier. But we went through this project with its challenges and its good things. And when the project was done and we had delivered everything, we sat down and we had a retrospective of the entire project. So we looked at what had worked well, what hadn't worked so well, both for us and for our customer also. And then we put down all of our findings together with action points for all of them into a PowerPoint presentation that we also sent to our customer, so they could share our knowledge as well. We knew we would work together in more projects, so that's a good thing, learning together. And they really liked this. They liked having clear action points. We wanted to deal with issues we'd had. But that was one part of the retrospective results. Another part was that we looked at the technical improvements that was suggested by the team in the retrospective. And we created a Jira board called the Improvements Board, where we put down all the technical things we needed to improve. So make sure that whenever someone had time in the team, so whenever anyone in the team had time to spare, they could go into that board in Jira and grab something from it and implement improvements. And that was really a major thing that we learned in this project, to open up the floor for improvement and to give people time and possibilities to implement those improvements, because they would be good for us later on. So that's the internal tools board, the improvements board that we had. So new ideas was really the theme to this first project. So moving into the next project that we had, I had looked into behavior-driven development, trying to get a better grip of the actual use cases that our customers were doing. So I introduced this to the team and presented a way we could do it, or try using it. And we decided to try it out. So we did that in this project, using Cucumber to describe the use cases that our customers wanted to have. And we did that based on requirement documentation at the time. We also looked into how we could take these Cucumber stories and use them in our automated testing. At this time, it wasn't entirely possible to do so, but we stayed on that path anyway, just leaving it for now where it was. What we did do in the testing section was that we had some time to look at that improvements board that we had in Jira, and we had a first version of our automated testing tool, the one that Jesper and Christopher have presented earlier today. And this was a very important path to walk down for us, and one we have stayed on ever since, of course, because the problems we'd had in the previous project with test turnaround being too long, that was now shortened quite a bit, which meant that not only did we have better quality, because we could also raise the code coverage for our unit testing, but we also could be more efficient in our coding, in our development. So both quality of code and quality of work were improved by this implementation. So that's a very important step for us. So now we have the behavior-driven to look at the use case. We had our unit testing to look at the smaller picture. But I saw sort of a gap in between them. So I added something I call the ocular test session, which basically means that QA sits down with the tech lead or development lead, and maybe some of the developers for each sprint delivery, and look at the use case tests we had done to make sure that we had covered everything in those, that we looked at corner cases, and that they were done in the correct way. So sort of an extra layer of review. And that turned out to be quite good. We did find some black holes in our testing, so that's something we will be sticking to from that project. But something that was really important as well, that was the outcome of all these things, was that we were starting to look at requirements as user stories or as use cases. We wanted to learn how to tell the customer story better. Because as you know, when your customer don't really know what they want until they see it, it's quite difficult to have a good development project. It could actually become quite expensive, and maybe even a failure if you're unlucky. So helping your customer find their story and finding that common understanding of what you want to achieve is really, really important. Because if you have the same expectations, then it's easier to achieve quality. So that's what we wanted to do. So for the next project, we sat down. We had our project retrospective from the earlier project that we ran, and we decided to keep going with behavior-driven development, maybe look into it some more. So we did that. We also extended those automated tools that we had. We set quite high coverage goals for our unit testing, for example. But we also tried other things. We tried some paths. We backed down from some of them. We tried describing requirements in using mind mapping and things like that to try to get into all the complexities of the project and the requirements, but that didn't really work out, so we backed down from that. We tried some different plugins in Jira and other tools. Some we kept and some we let be. But the most important in this project was really that our system architect, who was also the one with the main customer contact, who was actually talking to the customers, trying to systemize our projects, he also got involved in wanting to tell the story, wanted to get the customer story right. And so that was really important because he could talk to the customer, they could agree on what the story was, and then he could put that down into our requirement base and put that down into use cases and diagrams that we then could use for our development and verification. So that was really important. But also by now, it was quite apparent that it was important to tell the user story, to tell the customer story. So not only the team was interested in having the quality way of thinking anymore, the entire business unit was, because it turned out to be a very important thing to have, quality way of thinking. So it says project number 3, it's actually number 4. That's a project where we actually took everything we learned so far and put it to the test, really. And this was a really, really smooth project, I have to say. Everything fell into place. We could really try out all the things we had, all the paths we decided to stay on. We used that information, and of course, we reached greatness in that project. So that was the actual journey, using our improvements and team communication to reach better quality. And with that, coming to the end of that story, where did we end up? What actually happened? And was it good or bad? Well, I have to say we were now quite close to a well-oiled machine, actually. We had the business case from our customer, use cases, user stories and diagrams that our system architect could take from the customer information. He could communicate with the customer about those. So we could take that into the project and implement our testing code and our code, and then into a delivery. And in each and every one of these steps, we could apply a quality way of thinking. And we could achieve great quality of delivery as well in each and every one of these steps. So a well-oiled machine. But that's not all. where we have landed, and I should say where we have landed right now, because we are always improving, we are always changing our ways of working and looking at new things. But where we are right now is that we have a combination of test-driven development and behavior-driven development. Test-driven for our lower-level testing, behavior-driven for our higher-level testing, black box testing, if you will. We visualize user process and try to put them into context so that everyone in the team can know what we're actually working with. How will it be used? What's the purpose of it? We have our automated unit test on our own testing framework. We have our automated system test based on our cucumber stories and our use case diagrams. We have that ocular test follow-up that I mentioned to cover the gap between the two. We have kept that. And we have the gatekeeping criteria in our projects, like definition of done. Peer reviews. You have to have your code reviewed by someone before you can put it into a master branch, for example. We have to communicate. We have our daily meetings and so on. Things that need to be done, and test coverage to in there as well. But even more important, we have a team that takes full responsibility. They really take pride in having great quality, because coding and development is the craft, so you want to be proud. You take pride in your craft, and that's very important. So they take full responsibility for everything they do. And we make sure to have a really high ceiling for invention and improvement. It's better to say yes than to say no, because something good can come out of it. We wouldn't have the testing framework if we hadn't said yes. So we try to be yes-sayers when it comes to improvement and inventions. So that's where we are right now. But that's not really all of it, because as I mentioned, we had a theme to our story, the expectation and the freedom and responsibility that the team members felt. And that's led to a number of things, actually. As I said, they take pride in what they do. It's led us to innovation. It's led us to have greater confidence in what we do. It's also led us to having the best in the world at what they do, among the best of the world, definitely. We have very skilled people, and they want to be skilled and keep that skill, and they want to spread that skill as well with people that come into our projects. And all this have, of course, led to happier customers, happier project managers, happier quality assurance people like me. So that's a very good thing, and it's also led us to some new business cases, because innovation, that can be a good business case, and you keep your eyes and ears open to that. So it's led to a bunch of good things. Not to mention the great quality of code and the great quality of work that we have, and that was actually one of our QA goals that we set up at first. So it's been a great journey for us. But going into that, the moral of the story, what could that be when we reach the end? Well, what is the moral of the story? Is there one? And is it useful for you? Well, I would say there are three main points that I would take out from this, and that maybe you can take with you as well. First, not knowing everything, that isn't necessarily a weakness. It could be a strength as well, but not necessarily, because of that, you must find a way to deal with it the way it is. You have to be adjustable. You have to be agile. And don't be afraid to try new things, because remembering to find new ways when necessary is important. But as I said, leave those breadcrumbs so you can turn back on paths that doesn't suit you and continue on others instead, to find what's best for you and your team. And speaking of the team, my third point, knowing the bigger picture of what you want to deliver as a team member, and where you fit into a larger context, that makes you more. It makes you work harder to achieve good quality. It makes you feel like part of that quality of delivery, and it makes you more aware as well of quality issues. So I, as a quality assurance person, I don't have to be the gatekeeper, because the team is their own gatekeeper. they have pride in high quality, and that's very important. Knowing your place in things. So those three things I would definitely say are the moral to our story. But the question I asked, how is this useful to you, and how can you take this into your business? Well, and also I was talking about QA, but I haven't mentioned a tester so far. Why haven't I done that? Well, I'm not sure if this is useful to you. Maybe it's not, but I think that it's a path worth exploring for you if you're doing these type of projects. But that's for you to decide, of course. Why haven't I mentioned any testers? Well, I haven't mentioned testers because I think that quality is a mindset, and it's not. There are lots of roles involved in quality, from business units, from the salespeople to the team to the system architect, all the way to a tester, and ultimately the user, the end user. All those are players in the quality game. So the tester is only one of them. So quality is a mindset. Take that with you. Finally, I wanted to say that automation and storytelling and innovation, those were the keys to our success. But just as important is the team members' way of striving to become better all the time. And also the company's way of striving to become better all the time. To be open for improvement. And that goes always, of course. So that's it for me. Any questions on that? You're welcome to ask them.
Yeah, if you have a question for me, just let me know. Let me bring the microphone back, because we are recording, and unless the microphone is with you, the audience listening in won't hear your question. Just be close to the mic.
Yeah. Question for you. So you mentioned quality in your software. So what type of quality assurance or metrics are you putting in place to quantify, right? You said quantity, you said quality, pride, but there's got to be something there, right, that identifies what that means. What's that translate into? So how do you define good software quality through metrics and service assurance?
Well, you could say that our delivery process in these projects, it was up until delivery into integration tests with network components. So we have been looking at incoming issues from those tests mainly, doing root cause analysis for all incoming issues, looking at where errors happen, are they errors at all, and so on. That's one aspect. We're also looking at expectation, though incoming errors that are not actually functional errors are often something with regarding expectation. We missed something that a customer or the tester were expecting but didn't get. So we're looking at that as well. That's actually the next step, to look more at customer satisfaction, if you will, to look at if we did we really meet the expectations that they had. So that's one metric we're looking at.
Sorry. we want to hear you again.
Sorry. So let me take that to the next level. So do you have a model that's in place that quantifies success? Again, I think when you hand things over to customers, there needs to be some sort of formal metrics or model in place that defines quality, that defines success, versus a developer running through QA and saying, okay, it works. Well, define that for me. And again, I think that's something that I'd like to understand, how you're defining success and giving it that check.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do you understand where I'm going there?
I think I understand you. Well, we are not, as I said, what we are looking at is essentially incoming issues from integration tests, incoming issues from later support projects, and that's how we. And on the higher level, of course, we look at recurring projects returning customers. But those are the things that we look at. And we also look at, from the quality perspective, we also look at the time things take, how efficient are we, what can we, how early can we catch the errors that we get. And we can see quite a difference in that, in the type of errors that we now get from integration testing and from acceptance testing. There are quite a few, I would say, and they're really into corner cases most of the time. So that's what we're looking at. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? So, okay.
Thank you. In your storytelling, the user stories are very crucial, right, to develop the test case and so on.
Yes.
If you have a larger project, you will end up typically with a quite large number of user stories.
Yes.
How difficult did you find it to get really good user stories? Because ideally, it should be told by the customers.
Yes.
If you have larger projects, you will have many customers. So A, to collect the stories, but B, also to ensure consistency amongst the stories, because they are very often also very different expectations with regards to the same solution. So how did you cope with that situation, and how did you handle that in a larger project?
Well, as I said, we were lucky to have a systems architect that really wants to get the story right. So he does successive workshops with customers and so on. We don't have we don't have a lot of variations on the same story, so to speak. You mentioned you have a lot of customers telling the story differently. Mostly we have one story that is told, so to speak. So that makes it easier for us. But yes, we can have really large numbers of user stories or use cases, definitely.
What has been typically in the project you have seen the number of user stories you use to derive your test cases?
They're not actually user stories, they're more use cases, and then we take them in as user stories, so they're not really the same as we do it. But in use cases, I don't know what the largest number could be, but it's definitely, we have been in the 100+ stories or use cases. Then there are then we can also take into account the corner cases and so on, but we usually don't put them in as use cases. We just do a variation on the same use case. So we do the main flow as a use case, and then when we put that into test cases, then we do the variations and corner cases on that level.
Great. One final question. In your slide, you have shown that you have the use case and then you derive the user stories, right? That
Yes.
was in the flow. Now you're describing it a little bit differently. So what is the way how you really did it?
Well, we have the use case defined from the customer. So that's our high-level requirement. From that, we take that into Jira, into our add-on that we have there for behavior-driven development. We take that use case, and from that we create the user story. Now that could be one user story, but it could be several user stories depending on the type of implementation that we have. So that's why I didn't want to put an equal sign between them. But the verification of the use case is done towards user stories, and that's for practical reasons, because then we can connect the user story directly into our coding repositories, and that way we can trace from the requirement to the user story to the test case and make sure that we have covered everything. But then, as I said, since there's not an equal sign between use case and user story, we need to have tracing for those as well. So referencing is very important. But yeah. So Jira is our main tool for test management as well in that way.
Any other questions from you? Okay.
Yes, I could have taken this internal, but I guess it's interesting for the others as well. What is the timeline of these 4 projects? How long time did it take for you to get through them?
These are roughly 4 years. So it's very large projects and very complex projects. So that includes the time in between to make improvements, of course, as well. But the timeline is roughly 4 years. Yeah.
Thanks.
And it continues, of course. I put this up because I wanted you to see my email address and LinkedIn account in case you can think of any more questions later on, then you know where to find me if you don't find me in the building. So please do that.
Any further questions for Mia while we have her? Okay. All right, with that, a couple things. First time, I'd like to thank Mia. Let's give her a hand. Thank you so much. And,
Cisco, the bridge to possible.